USPAP, page 160. Advisory opinion 32 continued. In the interests of equity, the scope of work in mass appraisal assignments for ad valorem taxation can include consideration of appraisal level. For instance, the overall proximity between appraised values and actual prices, and the uniformity of property values. For instance, equity within groups of alike properties. Standard Rule 5-1A states, in developing a mass appraisal, an appraiser must A. Be aware of, understand, and correctly employ those recognized methods and techniques necessary to produce a credible mass appraisal. The appraiser is responsible for recognizing when the concepts of appraisal level and appraisal uniformity are necessary for credible assignment results in a mass appraisal assignment for ad valorem taxation. Reporting. Standards Rule 6-1 and 6-2 address the requirements for reporting mass appraisal results for real property and personal property. The mass appraisal report must clearly communicate the elements, results, opinions, and value conclusions of the mass appraisal. In mass appraisals for ad valorem taxation, local statutes may prescribe additional reporting requirements and procedures for the delivery of the assignment results. In mass appraisal, the value opinion for each property is developed using the standard methods applied in the mass appraisal model for a universe of properties. There may be many mass appraisal models used to value an entire universe of properties. An individual property record or worksheet may describe the valuation of the specific property after the application of the mass appraisal model. A written report of the mass appraisal as described in Standards Rule 6-2 is not provided for each individual property. To understand the individual property result developed in a mass appraisal requires the examination of all the information and analysis required by Standards Rule 6-2. Standards 2 and 8 address the requirements for reporting of appraisal results for real property and personal property, respectively. The written report must be presented in an appraisal report or restricted appraisal report. An appraiser may be asked to communicate the assignment results for a single property that was appraised as part of a mass appraisal assignment. USPAP does not address this specific circumstance. The reporting requirements of Standard 2 apply to appraisal assignments developed under Standard 1 and do not apply to mass appraisal assignments prepared under Standard 6. However, the second sentence of the preamble states, it is essential that appraisers develop and communicate their analysis, opinions, and conclusions to intended users of their services in a manner that is meaningful and not misleading. Additionally, the ethics rule states an appraiser must not communicate assignment results with the intent to mislead or defraud. The ethics rule also states an appraiser must not use or communicate a report that is known by the appraiser to be misleading or fraudulent. Therefore, if an appraiser communicates mass appraisal or assignment results for a single property, the communication must be meaningful and must not be misleading. In assignments for ad valorem taxation, public policy may direct property owner notification of the property values rendered in a result of a mass appraisal. Notifications are commonly required within the jurisdiction to meet due process requirements. These property owner notifications are not reports, as defined in USPAP. Further, a party receiving a notification in order to satisfy disclosure requirements does not become an intended user unless the appraiser identifies such party as an intended user as part of the assignment. Work file requirements. The record-keeping rule requirement to prepare a work file applies to appraisals and mass appraisals performed for ad valorem taxation assignments. An appraiser's assignment work file preserves evidence of the appraiser's compliance with USPAP and other information as may be required to support the appraiser's opinions and conclusions. For a mass appraisal assignment, compliance with the record-keeping rule requires a work file for the mass appraisal assignment, not a work file for each property in the mass appraisal. The work file for a mass appraisal contains the information to support the valuation of all properties in the mass appraisal. This supporting material may be documented in any form of media, including electronic files, and includes such items as property records, market data, sales ratios, and other statistical studies. Appraisal manuals and documentation, market studies, model building documentation, regulations, statutes, property photos, sketches, aerial imagery, maps, automated mapping and geographic information systems, worksheets, spreadsheets, and analysis reports. USPAP does not dictate the form or format of work file documentation. There is no requirement that the contents of the work file be held in a single location. The retention of the work file in support of an assignment for ad valorem taxation is governed by USPAP and may also be subject to retention schedules in the jurisdictions. The record retention time frames referenced in the record-keeping rule are minimums. Retention beyond the USPAP requirements is permitted unless compelled by law or regulation. Page 161. Advisory Opinion 32 continued. USPAP does not permit appraisers to destroy records prior to 5 years after preparation for any reason. Jurisdictional Exception Rule. The Jurisdictional Exception Rule exempts appraisers from the part or parts of USPAP that are precluded by the law or regulation of a particular jurisdiction. If compliance with a part of USPAP is precluded by any applicable federal, state, or local law or regulation, only that part shall be of no force and effect in that assignment. Appraisers using the Jurisdictional Exception Rule must properly disclose the legal authority justifying the exemption of part or parts of USPAP that are precluded by law. Use of the Jurisdictional Exception Rule is triggered by a contradiction between the requirements of USPAP and the law or regulations of a jurisdiction, not by client or appraiser discretion. USPAP does not establish who or which assignments must comply. Therefore, the Jurisdictional Exemption Rule cannot be applied to the decision to comply with USPAP. An individual's identification as an appraiser is the basis for determining who should comply with USPAP. This is because an individual's public identification as an appraiser establishes an expectation that valuation services will be performed in compliance with USPAP. An individual must comply with USPAP when required by law, regulation, or agreement, even if the governing authority's policy does not require USPAP compliance. Other applicable law or regulation might require compliance. Illustrations. Number 1. An appraiser is in the process of developing appraisals for the next year's tax roll. The residential properties, condominiums, and general commercial and major commercial properties will be valued with a mass appraisal model. Which development standards apply? Answer. Because the subject of the appraisal is a universe of properties, and because they are being appraised with a mass appraisal model, standards 5 and 6 apply. Number 2, an appraiser has completed a mass appraisal for ad valorem taxation using a mass appraisal model. There is a special use property for which it has been determined that the mass appraisal model is not appropriate. This property will be appraised as an individual property. Which development standard applies to the appraisal of the special use property? Answer. Even though the special use property is being appraised for ad valorem taxation, standard 1 would apply because the subject is an individual property, not a universe of properties. Number 3, an assessment appeal is in process and an appraisal of an individual property is being conducted as part of that appeal. Which development standards apply? Answer: Standard 1 or Standard 7 would apply because an individual property is being appraised rather than a universe of properties. And lastly, number 4, an appraiser is conducting a mass appraisal for ad valorem taxation. A property record card is produced for each property. Is each property record card considered a report under Standard 6? Answer: no. The property record card is not the mass appraisal report. It is only a portion of the information and analysis supporting the mass appraisal.